All right, on to our instructor. Today, our instructor is none other than Shayne Myers. He was here with us last week and was teaching us out of the GoPro, taught us the first couple of concepts from that book. Excellent book. If you haven't got it, I highly recommend it. At least listen to it on our audio. Today, Shayne's going to be with us and teach us the next couple of concepts there. Shayne's a wonderful member of our team here at Team Elevate. He isn't the class clown and he doesn't seek to be the center of the life of the party or anything, but he's a wonderful guy to get to know. He is an entrepreneur that's just making huge strides, and we're excited to have you with us today, Shayne. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Ron. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It sounds great.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So last week, we discussed the first couple principles of GoPro, a book that has been a bit of a common thread I've noticed lately. In fact, our own John O'Neill referenced it on yesterday morning's team call, which I thought was interesting. He referred to it as the best book that he knows of on, acquiring the necessary skill set to go out and be a successful network marketer. Now, we are in a direct sales opportunity, but network marketing and direct sales, they're very, very similar. The principles can be applied both ways. Just like when you go out and you market the Renatus opportunity and you have success on that side of the business, those skills translate to the real estate side of the business, right? And so last week, it's kind of a review. We discussed finding prospects and inviting prospects so that they can gain an understanding, which were two of the 7 steps. Now this week, I would like to cover presenting your product or opportunity to your prospects as step 3, and following up with your prospects. Now, I think I could sense some eye rolling when I discuss follow-up. I feel like follow-up sometimes for many of us, maybe I'm just speaking for myself and some of my team members, but I feel like follow-up has been, a sore subject or a bit of a blind spot, if you will. But it doesn't have to be, because just kind of a precursor to, build some intrigue and keep you attentive throughout the call. Follow-up is sometimes it leads to the close, right? Sometimes people, based on your line of questioning, are ready to get started, and you can move straight to the close. But oftentimes, right, it's not something that necessarily has to be, let's get you started, pull out your credit card, let's go. Oftentimes, it simply leads to plugging an individual in to the next exposure, right? Always book a meeting from a meeting. A BAM-FAM is the acronym, right? And so if you view it as, oh no, I got to collect the order, I got to close them here, I got to push them to get started, they got to have to spend some money with me, right? My subconscious voice from my past life is telling me, like, man, you went to school with this guy, you were buddy-buddy, and now you're pulling money out of him? It's not like that. It doesn't have to be that way, right? Follow-up is simply they attended one of your events and you're seeing where they're at, okay? And we'll hop into that and discuss it more in depth in a moment. But first things first. So presenting your product or opportunity to your prospects. There's a quote by the author, Eric Worre, and he says, the person with the marker makes the money. Is it true or is it not? Okay? I want to spend just a couple minutes on this because I know that a lot of us on this call are brand new, no matter where we're at, we're all still learning. But stay with me, because it is true that the person with the money, or excuse me, the person with the marker makes the money. Look at Mitch Nilsson and look what he's done with the marketing opportunity. Michael Huggins, John O'Neill. Look how much more success Dane Clark has experienced since he's made the decision to get in front of the room every Friday night. Thank you for that, Dane. We appreciate you. So many of us, as we've stepped up and gotten out of our comfort zone, as we become comfortable being uncomfortable, and we begin to accept that concept and stepped in front of the room and begin to present, incomes increase, right? And so I want to talk just for a couple quick minutes before we talk about presenting in another light, if you will, about a few keys to presenting and being credible. So firstly, when you present, and as I'm going through these, think about the example that Mitch gives us and what he does on a Thursday night. He does these things perfectly, right, to the T. First of all, his presentation varies very little, if at all, right? He has a system down that works. It's made him and us a lot of money, and more importantly, it's helped a lot of people. And so he keeps it virtually the same on a week-to-week basis. And that's important, right? Because if you're tracking your stats and if you want to know where you're at, you have to be able to look back and say, hey, I know it's the same every single week. It had nothing to do with my presentation, right? It's the most effective way to do it. I'm sticking to it. And let's work on the other elements of the presentation to better those, the closing ratio, the show-up ratio, all those things. Okay, so number one, once you've got so memorizing your presentation, right? You need to learn your story, okay? The stories are super important. You should be telling your story several times throughout the day, okay? This is what gets people listening. People aren't interested as much in how much you know, right? This is not a system that teaches us, hey, let's show people how much we know and how smart we are, and they'll sign up, right? People want to be able to relate to you, right? We are closed on emotion more so than we are on logic in the sales world, right? So learn your story. You have to memorize it. It has to be consistent, and you should have different variations of your story. You should be able to tell a quick 30 to 60 second story. You should tell a story that's, 2 or 3 minutes long, and you should have a story that's, maybe 10 minutes long. And based on where you're at, right? If you're hanging out at local Denny's and you think for some reason your waiter or your waitress is a good prospective student, and you're probably not going to go into a 10-minute story, but maybe a 2 or 3 minute story on, your background and so forth would be more appropriate. So learn your story. Secondly, as part of the presentation, learn the opportunity presentation. Right? If you want to get up in front of the room, I was sitting through the Spanish presentation a couple weeks back, and I learned that Virgil virtually goes through the same presentation that Mitch gives, right? So he's learned the opportunity presentation that we have that works, that breeds results. He gets up and he does it in a different language, uses the same slides, and then people will rush to the back of the room at the end of the presentation to plug into the next event, right? It's a process, it's a system that works. Okay, and then the third part to presenting in front of the room is learn the different training presentations, right? So learn the follow-up, learn how to do a house tour. These phone calls are, maybe they're a little bit of middle ground, but they're great, can be a great springboard into learning how to physically get in front of a room. right? People aren't looking at you, but you can still learn to articulate, you can still prepare, you can still memorize, and you can still sharpen all those skills by saying yes when Ron comes and finds you on a Thursday night, right? How can you say no to that big smile? All right, so that's for presenting in front of the room. Now, I want to give a word of caution, because that learning in front of the room deal and how we present to others when we first meet them and create a lead, I guess you could say, those are two different things, right? We're not presenting to everyone in the way that we do on a Thursday or on a Friday night, right? And so keep that in mind, right? The important thing is when we present, hey, I'm so and so. Look, this is where I came from. This is why I was dissatisfied. Look what Renatus has done for me. Boom. The focus isn't necessarily to position yourself as the expert, but we want to build enough intrigue and enough excitement and enough interest, whereas we can plug this individual in, we can invite them to come learn more about our opportunity and our education, right? And so just keep in mind that you are people's first exposure, right? So if you are not seeing the success that you desire, or if you want to take your success to the next level, ask yourself, what things are you doing as the first exposure, as the first presenter, that you can adjust and make better, right? Because somebody calls you off your ad or off your drop card, right? Or you meet somebody in a public place, you're the first exposure, right? They're looking at you. They're going to look at, what you're wearing from head to toe. They're going to look at whether you did your hair or not that day. They're going to look at, and subconsciously they're going to be saying, is this guy credible? Can I listen to him? Right? And so look credible, look the part, know your story. But just remember, right, you want to know what you're talking about, but we are referring individuals to the expert, right? Or to the presentation, the opportunity, right? And then when Mitch gets up in front of the room here in Salt Lake on a Thursday night, he does the same thing, right? He goes through his story. He's got his presentation memorized. He does a great job. He's a pro, and so he brings passion, enthusiasm. He's got excitement, belief, right? Those are all things that you need to have as a presenter. Passion, enthusiasm, excitement, belief. And then what he does is, it's not a rush to the back of the room, pull out your visa, let's get you started, right? He just simply books them to part two, what we used to call the follow-up, right? So there's a lesson to be learned there. We never when we spend time, our time is extremely valuable, right? We've already come to the conclusion that time is the most valuable asset in which we possess, and it's a resource that we cannot renew. Right? Money, there's plenty of that to go around. Knowledge, we can acquire it. It's important too, obviously. But time is different, right? So if we're going to spend time with people and put value into them, we need to make sure that we're plugging them in right away, right, to the next event as quickly as possible. And that's really what separates the posers, like I talked about last week, the posers from the amateurs to the pros. Make sense? So the posers prospect somebody once and they'll move on. And if you're an amateur, over a span of time, several months, for example, we'll prospect and prospect and prospect. But professionals condense those exposures into the shortest time frame possible, right? So let me give you an example. I met with a prospective student yesterday. Things went really well. He said, hey, I'm looking to start an LLC. Right? And like I learned when I was at education last week with Jay Massey, I said, well, why? Tell me more. Why an LLC? Right? Something to that effect. Oh, I want the tax benefits. And so my next question was, and it's because I'm a product of the product, and I watched part of Mark Kohler's class on Saturday, I said, well, are you aware that tax benefits are minimal to none to become an LLC, as an LLC, as opposed to another form of entities? Really? I said, yeah, let me show you. Right? So I pulled up Mark Kohler's class, figured out which section it is, but it's class 1, it's toward the middle of the class. He starts talking about the different types of entities, right? And I let him watch 10 minutes, or 12 minutes, I think it was, of the LLC course section of, portion of Mark Kohler's Tax and Legal Day 1, right? And I could see the wheels turning as he watched, and I just shut up and let him watch, right? And his mind was blown. It's like, I need this. I'm like, exactly. That's why I took time out of my day, because you do need this, right? And so he committed with the proper line of questioning to get started on his essentials portion of education. This is an individual I've been working with for quite some time. Just hasn't been able to put things together to get his combo, and says, you know what, put a lot of time into him. We've exchanged some value. Let's get him started at the essentials level. Let's at least get him going and give him a chance to acquire some knowledge. Right? And then make the decision. We can help him along the way to acquire the rest of his education. And so we're set for Wednesday, tomorrow, to go over his funding options. And the question I asked is, hey, if I could show you a way with little to no money out of pocket, right? If I could go over a dozen different ways to find funding, right? And I've never sat somebody through that presentation. I told them that I haven't been able to find an option that works for them, which you get started in your essentials, right? He says, yeah. Okay. So he originally wanted to meet. He says, yeah, I could do same time this day next week, right? What was the difference? What did I change? I didn't say, oh, okay, yeah, let's just do this time next week. Okay, see you then, right? He's excited. He wants to get started. The intrigue is there. I'm not going to let that die out. And so what I learned from GoPro, as soon as he said, yeah, I can do the same time next week, I said, well, what's your schedule look like this week? Specifically in the next couple of days. He goes, oh, yeah. Let me look at my calendar. I can give you a call. And I said, well, I got a few minutes. Let me pull mine up and let's pull yours out. Okay. Right? So naturally, subconsciously, he was kind of looking to, lengthen the process. But I want to keep him hot, right? I want to be a pro. I don't want to be a poser or an amateur. So I want to get as many exposures into him as I can and then collect a decision, okay? So just to highlight, before we go into step 4, the follow-up, I think the key that I want to highlight here that applies to everybody, right? Because some of you are like, I don't want to get started. Remember, I just got started a few months ago, or I just want to get 5-star qualified. That's great. The point I want to emphasize is you must master your story. Okay? And so I recently had a change in scenery. I moved, brought this individual down to the apartment building I moved into, right? And I didn't have to take him on a tour, didn't have to show him anything. I could see this look when he came in, just kind of looked around and was like, wow, right? This guy's a product of the product. He's credible. He's the real deal. And so spent a half hour with him, showed him some classes, right? He knows my background. I reiterated my background, right? This is just so you have an idea. when I was newer in Renatus, I don't know how I met this guy. I used to be a full-time driver. I used to deliver a courier. I used to deliver food, right, on a full-time basis. Okay. And I went into Little Caesars in Murray one night, and he was like, "Here's your pizza, man." And first he said, "Okay, yeah, we're preparing the order to be raised soon," right? And I had recently been on training with Michael Huggins where he was talking about W-2s, right? And he gave that example of how sometimes they're zombies, right? You ask them questions and they're so in like take the order mode and go make the food, they won't even answer. And so I decided to put it to the test, right? And this, I give him credit because he actually paid attention and he answered some of my questions, right? And I could sense there was some real pain in what he was doing, right? And he seemed like I don't typically go to Little Caesars and recruit my most successful students, but this seemed kind of like an exception to the rule for that place, right? He was high quality, he was young, but he seemed like he was driven and there was some serious pain in that. He just looked worn out. He looked like he was done, right? And so I knew my story then and I rehashed it yesterday, right? And there are 4 parts to the story in reviewing here as we move on to follow. You got to know your background, right? Step 1. So I was a blank. I was a salesman. I was a nurse. I was a construction worker. I worked in masonry, whatever it is. Number 2, you need to share with people as part of your story things you didn't like about your background, right? So Michael Huggins talks about evoking emotion as you share with individuals your dissatisfaction. And so, listen to the difference. I just didn't like the way they were paying me, right? As opposed to, man, I was extremely frustrated with the tiny paychecks I was receiving for all the work I was putting in, right? Or it was really hard. You know, I was recently married, had a newborn child, and I rarely saw my family because I was working so much just to get by. And that was extremely frustrating to me. You see the difference? You can feel the difference, right? When you talk about things you didn't like about your background, be sure and articulate yourself correctly and evoke that emotion that people relate to, right? Because it's emotion that helps people move forward and make the decision, right? More so than logic. Step 3 of mastering your story, how the Renatus opportunity came to the rescue, right? Whether it's marketing, real estate, or some combination of the two. Now, I can hear the new people saying, well, I'm brand new. I'm not even 1-star qualified, man. I have the success that you have. I haven't put a combo in the last month, like so-and-so has. I don't have a rental. I've never done any land deals. I've never done a fix and flip. So you have 2 opportunities here, right? So if you've had some success, share it, right? Briefly. So since joining Renatus, boom, 6 months into my first fix and flip, made close to 62 grand just by applying what the class is taught. Wait for the reaction. Look at it. Look at their face. You can see it, right? Well, if you're new, this part of the story changes just a little bit, right? So rather than, hey, well, since I joined, I'm just learning and I haven't done a whole lot, but I'm going to do some things. No, it doesn't have to be that way. Man, I just joined Renatus last week, right? And how you tailor your message to this prospect, this is where the talent or the skill set comes in, right? Of listening, of understanding where your prospect is coming from and how they can relate, right? So let me give you an example. If you got some kid that comes down and he's up to his eyeballs in student loan debt, he doesn't have a mortgage, and you have a mortgage and you're paying it down really quickly, you're probably not going to sit there and talk about, oh, listen, since I joined this program, I've been able to pay my mortgage down by X amount. I learned I can save X number of thousands of dollars by using this velocity banking thing, right? You want to be relatable. You want people to listen. In order to invoke that emotion, people have to relate. So in this part, maybe they have another business, right? Man, since joining, I've been plugged into my classes, just like you're going to do. And here's what I've learned, ... Let me share with you what I learned last night in Mark Kohler's tax and legal class. And I was thinking about starting an LLC, and I had no idea that LLCs were for more like the 12-month long-term business stuff, right? I would have thrown away so much money in taxes by having started an LLC rather than an S Corp. See what I did there? I just showed this individual, even though I haven't flipped my first deal yet, I haven't put a combo in, more essentials. I'm not 1-star or 5-star qualified. But I just shared with them, since joining, I have been able to learn X, right? I'm exchanging value, okay? And step 4 of being a master presenter, first, mastering your story in order to become an expert presenter, a professional, is where you talk about not only your results and or you're going to discuss how you feel about the future, right? Gratitude is something everyone can relate to, pardon. And did you know that just writing down 3 things every morning that you're grateful for actually rewires the way your brain is wired and programmed? Just 3 things every morning. It takes like 30 seconds, man, less. Right? Oh, today I'm grateful for team calls. I'm grateful for a nice iron shirt and the beautiful sunrise that I witnessed this morning. And so, step 4 here is, man, I am just so grateful that I came across this opportunity here. I'm so grateful that so-and-so introduced it to me. So grateful for the Rosenbergs who were patient enough with me. I finally made a decision to move forward, right? And I'm really, really excited for what the future holds in my X business, my fix and flip business, and my wholesale business. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so excited to go share this wonderful opportunity with so many other people who need this knowledge, who need this help, right? Okay, so 4 parts of the story so you can become a master presenter. Your background, the things number 1, and number 2, things you didn't like about your background. Number 3, how the Renaissance opportunity came to the rescue. And 4thly, your results, show your gratitude and talk about how excited you are for the future. Right? And again, number 3 is your results, how the Renaissance opportunities came to the rescue. Since joining X, I've either learned this and or I've done this, right? Either one works, okay? I've used both, right? Sometimes, even though I've had some success, I've done a number of real estate transactions. We've put a number of educational sales in. Sometimes I still say, man, I was just in a class last night that blew my mind and I just learned this. And because it still works. And if that's what the person needs, I'm going to use it. Okay, so let's go into follow-up. This is where the fortune is, right? The fortune's in the follow-up. How many of you have heard that? I have, right? And follow-up is not this painful process where you're beating people over the head for not following through, okay? It's just doing what you said you were going to do, right? Anybody here read the book called, I believe it's called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz? Okay? The first agreement was being a man of your word, being a man of integrity, right? If you honor your word, the likelihood of your prospects honoring their word and doing what they said they're going to do increases. How cool is that, right? Your prospects will mirror you, right? They will follow your lead. So if you follow through and do what you say you're going to do, your prospects are likely to do the same, right? And so the thing with network marketing, with direct sales, with MLM, right, is the business, this line of business is full of people who get all excited 1 minute and then go missing the next, right? And my exhortation to you would be, don't be that guy. Don't say you're going to do something and then not follow up. It's that simple, right? If you say you're going to call at 11 a.m., you call at 11 a.m. Don't call at 11:05. Don't call at 11:20. If you're going to be late, send a text 10, 15 minutes ahead of time. Hey, I got a phone call running over. Call you at X time, right? Keep people in the loop. People's time is valuable, just like yours. So the solution to that problem is I rarely set an exact time. I usually tell people between 11 and 11:05, I'll call you. Right? That gives me 5 minutes to finish up a prior phone call. That way I'm not cutting off my other prospect. Okay, and then I'm still a man of my word. If I call at 11:04, I'm still a man of my word. If I call at 11 o'clock, still a man of integrity. And my prospects will mirror me. The only reason to have an exposure, right, is like I talked about just a few minutes ago, is to present or set up the next exposure. Okay, that is your sole purpose, right? There are 2 options, typically, right? At the end of an exposure, when you follow up with somebody, very rarely will you find someone who's like, yeah, this is just not for me. I don't like it. And if you do, great. They've saved you a lot of time. Okay? Don't beg them. Right? You need to find out where they're at, and they're either ready to get started when you move to the close, which we'll talk about on the next training, or they're ready to get answers to more questions, right? And so plug them in to the next briefing. Don't let people leave. Don't let people get off the phone. Don't finish an email chain. Don't let people leave a briefing without first dedicating the time, setting the time aside for the next conversation or the next meetup or whatever it might be, okay, the next exposure, right? That's how people fall through the cracks, okay? So when people don't do what they say they would, this is the tough part, right? We have to emotionally detach ourselves from what's taking place. Because it was really easy to be like, oh man, you just wasted my time. I'm so upset, bothered. You didn't watch the webinar. Life gets busy, man. You and I know that there have been times where individuals have asked us to do things and we've forgotten or we've gotten really busy, right? School, work, husband, wife, children, church, gym, all kinds of things, right? So rather than beat people over the head and say, well, are you committed? You gonna make this thing work, man? We're gonna build people up. We're gonna use a better response, right? So write this down. If people don't do what they say they're gonna do, your response is, that's okay. When do you think you can do it for sure, right? I didn't have time to watch that webinar. I didn't have time to go through that content you emailed over. Well, that's okay. When do you think you can do it for sure, right? And it sounds funny, it sounds a little repetitive, but it works, okay? And you just continue to do that until people act, right? Until they move forward and actually do what they said they were going to do, right? So I want to finish here by talking about how to follow up at the end of an event, right? Because we know follow up. I think when we hear the word follow up, it's like, oh, we just keep calling, texting, emailing, do everything until we can collect a decision, right? One way or the other. I mean, chances are people need, it takes an average of 4 to 6 exposures for somebody to get started. Our first qualifying sale that I did, we had an individual. He showed up to a Thursday night. He brought his wife to a Friday night with John O'Neill. This was back when we were doing them in Murray, Christian Sadler's office, and boom. He applied for funding, and a couple weeks later, his order was in. So he made a decision that night to move forward after 2 exposures, right? But for every individual that I've had after an exposure to is ready to get started, I have another 1 or 2 or more who take half a dozen or a dozen exposures to get started. Everyone's different, right? And so continue to invite, continue to book the meetings from the meeting. And this is how you're going to follow up. Let's go over this real quick. So at the end of your briefing, right, the easy question to ask is, hey, what did you think? Don't do this. Don't do it. It invites the cynical side of the brain to bring out the negative, right? Oh, that's really cool, but I could never, I could never qualify for a loan for a Corvette, or I could never get up in front of the room and present, or I mean, yeah. What's your success ratio? What's the percentage of people that are being successful at this thing? Tell me, right? So a better question to ask is, what was your favorite part? It's that easy, right? And 9 times out of 10, this is going to invite the positive out of them. This is going to, oh yeah, I really liked how he structured that deal. I liked the debt equity blend that he used. And just makes real estate appear a lot less risky than I once thought it was. Perfect. Look, man, we're going to talk more about that tomorrow night. Plug them in. Okay. So your next question is, once you've gotten out of them what they like the most, you are going to ask on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I'm ready to get started right here, right now, 1 being I'm not at all interested, thanks for your time. Where are you at? So first is, what's your favorite part on scale, and then on scale 1 to 10, 10 I'm ready to get started, 1 I'm not at all interested. Where are you at? Right? And you're going to find that most people are going to be somewhere between like a 6 and an 8 or a 9. Seriously. Right? Any number besides 1 is good. Okay? Any number besides 1 is good. So write that question down. On a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at? Okay? Great. Question number 3. Oh, okay, perfect. So you're an 8. Man, we've got a lot in common. I felt the same way. Feel, felt, found, right? Felt the same way. Tell me, Josh, tell me, Bob, whatever the name is, what would it take to get you to a 10? Right? And they're going to give you some of their questions and maybe some of their concerns on a smaller level. And you're going to talk to them then about how part 2 or a webinar or the Super Saturday or whatever it is that you're plugging them into next is going to solve that problem for them. Oh yeah, this seems really, really neat. I'm just not quite sure how you can make $10,000 a sale. I don't really get that part. And I guess I need to get some more answers on that before making a final decision. Okay, great. Hey, I felt the same way. I knew you could make a lot of money with this opportunity. I just didn't know how it worked. And that's what we're going to discuss more on Saturday, Super Saturday, right? That's what we're going to, I don't know how to fund this thing, man. This thing looks really cool. I just don't have that kind of money. Hey, don't worry. We're going to just pull the curtain back on a dozen different ways you can fund your education with little to no money out of pocket. I had the same question. I left that meeting, or I left that briefing. I try to avoid the word meeting. I left part 2 empowered with the knowledge of how to get started. and you can too. Okay? So just remember 4 to 6 exposures for a prospect to get started. Okay? Closers, prospects, someone wants to move on. Amateurs do several follow-ups, several exposures, but they do it over a long period of time. And as professionals, we aim to condense those exposures into the shortest time frame possible. Okay? People are busy, so we stack them together. We maintain the intrigue. That way we're not starting over every single time. Okay? We've got 3 minutes before the top of the hour. Any questions or comments? You get *6. You can bring yourself off mute.
Hey, do you know if the 4 agreements is on Michael's Audible account?
Indeed it is.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Going to look forward to that.
You're very welcome. Great book. Highly recommend.
Great call today. Appreciate all the info.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shayne, looks like the cat's got their tongue this morning. I want to say thanks for your instruction. Excuse me, got a frog in my throat. It's been great. Will you come back another time and continue with that book, Go Pro?